In the opening scene, we are introduced to Captain Vikrant Khanna, a renowned and skilled pilot known for his courageous emergency landings. Currently in Dubai, Vikrant arrives at his hotel after a successful landing and receives a call from a friend who invites him to a club. Initially, Vikrant declines the invitation, saying he has a flight to Cochin scheduled for the next day. However, when his persistent friend continues to insist, he gives in. Upon entering the club, Vikrant notices his friend staring at a beautiful woman whom he considers to be out of his league. But Vikrant is certain that he can seduce her with his good looks. So he proposes a bet, saying he can get the woman's phone number. If he loses, he will buy his friend a car. But if he wins, he will take his favorite motorcycle. These guys live on a different planet Earth than I do. The friend promptly agrees, and so the challenge begins. After drinking a few rounds, Vikrant confidently approaches the woman and entices her with smooth talk. Then he gets her phone number and convinces her to join him and his friend for a party. The three then dance all night and have a great time. Perhaps there's even an Eiffel Tower in Dubai before returning to their respective hotels in the early morning. Unfortunately, because of all the drinking, Vikrant misses all his alarms and falls behind schedule. He is eventually awoken by a call from his wife, who reminds him about their daughter's upcoming birthday. However, Vikrant, who is known to have an exceptional memory, assures her that he knows the date very well. As the time for departure draws near, Vikrant hastily prepares himself and makes his way to the airport, concealing his tired eyes behind sunglasses. Upon arrival, he meets his co-pilot, Tanya Albuquerque, and they briefly discuss their upcoming flight. They then engage in small talk before boarding the Skyline 777 aircraft. Once everyone has arrived, Vikrant addresses the passengers, providing them with important information about the expected duration of the flight, the distance to their destination, and the prevailing weather conditions. It's almost like any other normal flight, and the people appear to be calm. But once the plane is airborne and reaches a suitable altitude, Vikrant activates the autopilot mode and goes to sleep. Can he do that? After a short period of time, an engine alarm begins to beep, and Tanya struggles to identify the cause. Fortunately, Vikrant wakes up and quickly resolves the issue using his sharp wit. He then calls over a flight attendant and requests a cup of black coffee, saying he is still feeling drowsy. He also whispers the name of a specific medication, Viagra, which she understands and prepares for him. When Vikrant finally receives his coffee, he retreats to the restroom momentarily. Soon after, he returns to the cockpit, yeah he does, and engages in a brief conversation with his co-pilot. As time passes, it begins to rain heavily, with flashes of lightning and thunder. When the pilots check the fuel meter, they learn that the airplane still has 4,800 kilograms of fuel. Moreover, they estimate that it will take them approximately 45 minutes to reach Cochin. Meanwhile, at the Cochin Air Traffic Control Office, there is an elderly staff member by the name of Mr. Tripathi, who continues working despite his weak health. As the flight nears its destination, Tanya contacts the Cochin ATC to seek permission for landing. However, Mr. Tripathi informs her that the heavy rain has significantly reduced visibility on the runway, leading to negative response. You're gonna have to hold up, dear. Upon hearing this, Tanya consults with Vikrant regarding whether they should proceed with the flight or attempt the landing. She also lets him know that their fuel reserves are decreasing by the second, but to her surprise, Vikrant asserts that they will proceed with the landing, despite the challenging visibility conditions. Tanya then relays this message to the ATC, notifying them of the critical fuel situation. As a result, Mr. Tripathi finally grants them permission to land on runway number 27. Alright, come on in. Now, it is only a few minutes until the landing, but the rain has become even more violent. This sadly causes the aircraft to lose communication with the ATC, forcing them to abort the landing and fly again. In the next scene, a worried Tanya proposes to Vikrant that they consider landing in Bengaluru as a highly secure option. She calculates that they need 3,300 kilograms of fuel to reach there, and they still have 3,900 kilograms remaining. However, Vikrant disagrees and says that they will be heading to their original destination. He then contacts the Cochin ATC to seek permission for landing, a request that Mr. Tripathi grants. But unfortunately, the degrading weather once again blocks their view of the runway. Now, with time running out and people starting to panic, Vikrant swiftly alters the flight route to the adjacent city of Trivandrum. The plan is to land there as soon as possible. However, unbeknownst to him, the Trivandrum ATC is busy informing other airports to deny any flights bound for them due to an approaching storm. At the same time, Mr. Tripathi's health begins to deteriorate. I'm not feeling good. And he is replaced by another staff member. This staff member is unaware of the crucial emergency information received from Trivandrum. On the other hand, anxiety grows among the people awaiting the arrival miracle of their loved ones as news spreads about the flight diversion. Inside Flight 777, the condition is even more severe. The passengers have become restless, asking the flight attendants a series of questions. One of the passengers on board happens to be an aviation journalist who senses that something is amiss. When he informs the others about it, they all begin to panic and start screaming. The situation soon gets out of hand, so Vikrant himself is forced to come out of his cockpit and take charge. With a calm voice and a raging boner, he urges the passengers to collaborate, saying that they all share the common goal of reaching the destination safely. Meanwhile, at the Trivandrum ATC, the staff members are relaxed, assuming that no flights will be landing until further notice. But much to their dismay, they suddenly receive a landing permit from Tanya, who's aboard Flight 777. The staff nervously question her whether or not they received the storm emergency notification issued by the Cochin ATC. They further explain that the visibility on the Trivandrum runway is significantly poorer than in Cochin, implying that it is impossible to land. They suggest Bengaluru as an alternative landing option, but Vikrant informs them that they did not receive any emergency notifications. He also alerts them of their critically low fuel level. Hearing their conversation, the inexperienced Tanya begins to scream, but Vikrant manages to keep her composed. As the aircraft nears the runway, the turbulence intensifies, sending both the passengers and the flight attendants into a state of panic. This finally convinces the Trivandrum ATC that it's now or never, so they grant the aircraft permission to land on runway 16. Vikrant slowly brings down the plane and attempts to touch the runway, but the wheels lose traction, forcing him to abort the landing and ascend once again. Following this, he informs the ATC that they will make another landing attempt, but this time on runway 34. Hearing this, the ATC officials become worried and question the pilot's decision, revealing that the wind direction on 34 is horribly unsuitable for landing. They anticipate that the plane's tail may be ripped off, but Vikrant still does not budge. With the fuel running out quickly, he has to take matters into his own hands. After preparing himself mentally, Vikrant instructs the passengers to hold on tight as they are preparing for an emergency landing. He then shockingly closes his eyes and glides the plane to the ground as safely as possible. Eventually, the aircraft touches down and begins skidding. It almost reaches the end of the runway, but fortunately comes to a stop in the nick of time. This is how he touched down with his buddy last night, too. In this way, Vikrant has miraculously managed to land the plane safely, despite the extreme circumstances. However, the complications do not end there. In fact, they have only begun. Vikrant and Tanya find themselves facing an investigation by the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, or the DGCA, due to their extremely risky landing. The DGCA thoroughly examines every aspect of the flight, including the Mayday distress signal issued prior to the landing. Following the investigation, DGCA officials relay the unfortunate news that one of the passengers, an elderly woman, passed away due to a heart attack. After this, the investigation findings are forwarded to Narayan Vedant, a strict head of Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, AAIB. He will now be in charge of finding the culprits and punishing them. Meanwhile, Vikrant struggles with guilt as he blames himself for the old woman's death. He feels that he could have done a lot better to help his passengers. Shortly after, Vikrant receives a distressing call from the deceased woman's daughter, who calls him a murderer. She mentions that people like him should never be allowed to fly aircrafts. After the call ends, Vikrant tearfully returns home, where his wife attempts to console him, reminding him that if he was not the pilot, the incident could have been even more tragic. Meanwhile, Narayan and his investigative team examine the black box and gather all the information so that they can catch the guilty party. Later, Vikrant receives a notification from the AAIB, summoning him for the investigation that will take place the following week. Then, he gets a call from Narayan, who asks him to prepare for the upcoming proceedings. However, Vikrant calmly responds that he has nothing to prepare for, as he has nothing to hide. In the next scene, we are introduced to the director of Skyline Airways, named Nishant. He appears to be happy due to the substantial rise in his company's share price following the earlier incident. However, his expression quickly changes when he learns that Narayan will be the one leading the investigation. According to Nishant, Narayan conducts his investigations in a manner that leaves no chance for the accused to escape. Amidst these events, the airplane incident gains significant coverage on television. Opinions diverge, with some blaming the pilot for the woman's death and others commending their decision as the best under those circumstances. In a fascinating twist, none of those commenting are pilots themselves. The scene then transitions to Vikrant and Tanya's first trial, which is taken as a high-profile case. Narayan asserts that the captain was leading the flight while exhausted, having undergone a week of non-stop flights. He explains that pilot errors often stem from feelings of homesickness. However, Vikrant defends himself by drawing a parallel with soldiers who fulfill their duties faithfully, despite being separated from their families for long periods. Narayan then presents Vikrant with a bottle of Disprin, a medication accessible only to cabin crew and pilots. He suspects that Vikrant consumed this drug and proceeds to use a lie detector machine to prove his point. But, surprisingly, the captain successfully passes the questioning without any issues, leading to an adjournment of the first trial. Later that day, a meeting is conducted by the Skyline Company, where Nishant and other higher-ups advise Vikrant to remain silent during the trial, in order to avoid jeopardizing the company's reputation. However, the captain refuses to comply, which prompts Nishant to threaten him with blacklisting from the entire aviation industry. He also issues the same warning to Tanya before storming out of the place. During the second trial, Narayan subjects Tanya to a series of questions that leaves her struggling to choose her words carefully. Under this pressure, she reveals that the captain had red eyes before the flight and had taken a nap shortly after takeoff. Furthermore, she discloses their disagreement over selecting an alternative landing destination. When Vikrant claims to have had sufficient rest prior to the flight, Narayan unexpectedly presents the woman from the Dubai club. She reveals that they had been drinking and partying and Eiffel Towering until 6 in the morning. The captain does not deny her account and explains that he still managed to rest throughout the day. He highlights that the flight rules stipulate a 12-hour drinking ban for pilots before flying, and that the time difference between the end of the party and the plane's takeoff was approximately 15 hours, which proves that he hasn't violated the rules. Unwilling to give up, Narayan lists out Vikrant's mistakes from that day, including hovering over Cochin for 33 minutes and fueling the plane below maximum capacity. In response, the captain emphasizes that pilots aren't rule makers, but rather rule followers, and no responsible pilot would risk the lives of their passengers. Narayan then shifts his attention to Tanya, who then accidentally reveals the startling fact that Vikrant landed the plane with his eyes closed. This gives Narayan the perfect opportunity to highlight the captain's irresponsibility. Furthermore, he raises the issue of choosing the wrong runway. With these points raised, the second trial concludes without any defense from Vikrant. When he returns home, his wife accompanies him to the house of the deceased passenger's daughter. Although Vikrant is in a terrible mood at the moment, he offers his heartfelt apologies to the daughter's loss. The third day marks the beginning of the third trial. Just before the verdict is announced, Vikrant explains that he possesses a photographic memory of runway number 34 due to his landing experience there. To validate his claim, he requests a reenactment of the flight using the flight simulator. The judge approves of this, and in the next scene, we see Vikrant taking control of the plane with a blindfold covering his eyes. Narayan is also there in the co-pilot's seat, as he wants to inspect everything carefully. But to his shock, the blindfolded Vikrant manages to land the plane without even breaking a sweat. Finally, the judge comes to a conclusion, and Mr. Tripathi is dismissed for failing to relay the emergency information. Well, I probably deserved it. While Vikrant and Tanya's pilot licenses are suspended for 3 months only. Additionally, the AAIB announces a strict investigation against Skyline Airways. The scene then shifts to 3 months later, when Vikrant returns to flying. At the airport, a flight attendant from Skyline approaches him and confesses that she was the one who had consumed the Disprin. Out of fear, she reveals that she had wanted to confess earlier, but as a single mother, she was scared about losing her job. Vikrant asked for Viagra after all. Vikrant empathizes with her situation and reassures her, advising her not to worry. With this, he proceeds on his way, and the movie comes to an end.